Hi there, it's Andrew Burke from Code School Halifax again, and up until now we've just been working on our own little local web page with our HTML and some styling and a little bit of JavaScript that just says a few things and changes some stuff on the page. But now we're ready to step out and meet the real world. We're going to go find a bunch of data off the internet in what's called a public API, and we're going to figure out how to pull that data into our page and then do stuff with it. So this is exciting. We're actually hitting the real world. So hang on. Now here is our page that we've got up to so far. And here is our JavaScript, which is currently just writing some console log things. And here is our HTML and our CSS. That's all great, but all of this is just running pretty well locally. And the whole point of this project is to get some real-time information from out there and display it in a certain way here. So we need to get this data from somewhere. And where do we get that? Well, it turns out people are collecting data and making interfaces for being able to use that data all over the place, all around the world, all the time. And these are known as APIs. It's short for Application Programmer Interface. And basically they are data sources that are structured in a certain way that make it easy for other programs to reach them. And a lot of governments have this with their municipal data or their census information, all sorts of stuff. There's various institutions and even just enthusiasts who have all sorts of information. So if you want to try to find these, easiest thing is just search for public API. And you can see here a list of public APIs. There's a whole bunch of them. Actually, I'm going to go public APIs. And this is the list I've been using. There's lots of places that have them, that list them. But here's one. It's a GitHub page. It's just a big project. It's just a huge list of APIs by all these different kinds of categories. So we've got, health, data, cryptocurrency, anime, food and drink, games and comics, right? Weather, video, all sorts of things. And you can see here is, for example, animals. We have cat facts, okay? Different kinds of cats, pictures of cats, random pictures of dogs, random foxes, anime lists, let's see, malware virus definitions, art and design, books, book reviews, book information, publishing data, business. You get the idea. So there's a ton of these things all over the place. The Hebrew calendar, the Russian calendar. Let's see, there's a few more. You can track all your Bitcoins. Anyway, the one we're looking for here is in the health area. I'm going to keep scrolling down here. And yeah, there's a lot of fun culture ones as well if you're interested. Marvel movies, all sorts of things. Government is full of all sorts of interesting stuff from all sorts of different places. Here's Canadian government data, Italy, New Zealand, Taiwan, USA. But anyway, health, here's the one we're going to look at. It's COVID-19 spread, infection, and recovery, which is exactly what we need here. And let's open this up. And you click on this and it goes to a page, okay? So it's a free API for data on the coronavirus. And it's got a bunch of features. And up down here, you can see what the API stuff looks like. So it looks a lot like a web address. And that's sort of what it is. It looks like what you'd get to load a web page. But instead of when I look for this, it's going to bring back a bunch of HTML and then some linked CSS and whatever. This will just get data and bring it back. So it gives us some details. And you can see here, they all have documentation, but some of them have more complex ones, and you can show the different types of things. So based on the address that you send it, it will return new information. So let's, for example, take a look at summary. And if we just open up a new browser window and put that in, bang, here is a big chunk of data. This is what we're going to be working with down the line. But you can see here it's just a whole bunch of stuff in raw data. Okay. Now this is maybe a little bit hard to read, but one thing you should notice, remember we talked about objects and arrays a few episodes ago? Well, you notice this data is, here's a squiggly bracket that shows us an object with a label with a colon. And then after that, here's a square bracket that means it's an array. So this all the way down, we look for the next closing square bracket. It's way down here somewhere. There it is. Okay, it's closing square bracket. And then date is another object with just a timestamp of right now so that you can get this information and track it back. Okay, so this is an array of all the countries, and each country is also an object. So it's an object with an array. One of the things is an array of other objects. And each object is got a bunch of different things. So here is Afghanistan with its short name, number of new confirmed, total confirmed, deaths, total recovered, okay? All grouped together. So everything's got a different name, and it's all set up in this big thing alphabetically. And every time I reload, it might have different information. So this is the data we're going to be trying to get. It's a little hard to read, though, if you're trying to sort of figure things out. And every browser has a slightly different way of handling this. So one that I like is Firefox for this kind of thing. If we open up Firefox, it quickly shows the same thing, but then it realizes this is a data format and immediately shows us a much friendlier way to poke around at the information. And it's got collapsible and expandable things, and you can, poke around and try different stuff, and it's great. Okay, so this is an API. You send it a URL of some kind, and it will give you back a bunch of data. And in this case, and in many cases, the data is in a format known as JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which is basically a fancy way to say that it's pretty well just raw JavaScript, objects and arrays all together, basically bundled up into a web request. So instead of returning HTML, it returns this little piece of JavaScript, but it's not even executable code, it's just data. Okay, so what's great is we can take this and we don't even have to do any fancy organizing of this data to even parse it and read it and turn it into something we can use in JavaScript. It's basically already there. Older formats for doing this kind of thing that I had to spend a whole bunch of my career working on, things like XML and whatever, have been terrible this way. You always had to build a special library or use a special library or build special tools to parse the data out and convert it to different things you could finally use it. JSON is great because it brings it right in immediately and you have yourself some data, okay? So this is the thing we're going to be using. There's a whole bunch of other things that's in this API. You can search specifically by individual country, get a summary, everything else. And there's even, you can get a description of all the different addresses it tries to do. It's got available. And that's here, get all the data, get a list of countries, get a list of cases per country, per province. So you could break down country, Canada, status, etc., and it will break out. And you want to see confirmed, recovered, or deaths. You can get it by individual sub-elements and cases per, and actually specific individual numbers, all sorts of things. You can base it on dates. So a lot of these APIs have lots of different ways to slice and dice the information. So there's all sorts of tools on the server side that make this easy for people, but we're just going to be pulling this data out from places, okay? So let's show you how that actually works. So we have this thing that's going to return some stuff, but we don't quite know how to do that. Well, this is where jQuery comes in handy again. And we're going to do that in our fetch data area, right? Because that's what this whole point is for. And so what I often like to do is just put the URL in there right there as a comment. Oh, by the way, I guess I never covered comments. Comments are things to have a little note for yourself in the code that doesn't actually get run. And you can do that by putting 2 slashes at the beginning of the line. And that says, oh, this is a comment, ignore it. So the code doesn't run it, but you can have little notes inside your code to help you remember what things are for or to keep you in mind of things. This Visual Studio Code is very helpful. It makes it green. Okay, so we're going to keep our console log that says fetching data. And then we're going to use a jQuery function called get. Okay, so there's our $sign. If you remember from last time, that means we're doing jQuery. And the dot means it's going to be a jQuery thing. And it's called get. Okay, and it is a function. So it takes, brackets. And it takes 2 things. The first thing is the address you're looking for. So that's going to be this. Okay, and it has to be in a string. Otherwise it complains. Okay, and we can use single quotes, double quotes, doesn't really matter. I always I can never really decide sometimes for things like this, but there we go. That's the first thing. And the next thing is a little bit weird if you're not used to programming, especially with JavaScript. It's another little inline function. Whoops, cannot type today. Okay, just like this has a little function, this also is a little function. And now you could write your own separate function and put it somewhere else. But because this is like a one-off little function, we just do it right in line here. This is a bit hairy, it gets a bit weird, but you get used to it after a while working with JavaScript. The only headache is eventually you end up with a lot of these squiggly bracket, round bracket, semicolon at the end of everything. You can see some of them around. But anyway, this is a way of saying get this, but then when it's finished fetching, then run anything in here. Just like here was, when we finish loading the page, do everything in here. This is the same kind of idea. When it finishes getting this information, do something in here. Now, the reason we have to do that is because we never know how long it's going to take for this to actually run. Usually when you're doing regular old coding, it does this line, it goes to the next line, it does that line as fast as possible, does this line as fast as possible. It just does them sequentially, very, very quickly, and each line takes a tiny fraction of a second. However, this is going out to the internet, and you don't know whether it's the server could be busy, your internet connection might be slow or unreliable. There could be all sorts of other weird things going on. There could be a huge amount of data in here. So you never really know. So the summary, this kind of thing, is good to get and then have it run the next thing whenever it's done. So this is why we pass a function. Basically, we're passing a function as a parameter for another function, which is a little strange. You get used to it. And if that doesn't make sense to your brain, don't worry about it. You can just sort of type this in like this and not worry about it too much, okay? So there we go. So what we can do now is we can console log got data, okay? And let's just try that and see if it actually ran out there and got things and returned it. So let's go back to our page and let's open up our console here. Whoops. And pull this out a little bit and clear that out and reload the page. Okay. Fetching data, writing results, got data. Now it's slightly in a funny, now you notice here, this is a good example. Fetching data, so fetching data, and then it's supposed to go through here and then say got data and then write the results. But you'll see here it says writing results before it hits fetching data, before it hits got data. And that's because it took a while for it to actually get to here. And so in the meantime, it kept going and went over to here. Now, what we really want to do before we write any results is we want to actually put it in here so it happens afterwards. Because remember, these are all happening in different times. This is one of the trickier things to get your head wrapped around. Things are happening in parallel. Some things are going to keep running while it goes off and does something else elsewhere and then comes back. This is just the nature of modern web development. So just hang tight. It'll make more sense as you get to use it. So imagine it's like two windows open and one's loading a page, and while you're waiting for that to load, you go load something else, maybe check Twitter or something. Same kind of idea. So let's try that again. Okay, fetching data, got data, writing results. Okay, so fetching the data, it got it, and now it's going to write the results, which is write results, which says things there. Okay, so that's how we're getting things. And what data? How do we get data? What's the data? Well, that comes in. It's set up as an argument of this little function. So the get in jQuery is documented to be first the URL, the thing you're going to look for, and then a function that we run when we're done that we can pass the data into. Okay. In that case, then we can do console log data. Okay, let's just output the data and see what we've got. Okay, we don't even need to say got data because we're probably going to get that. Anyway, okay, let's see how that works. Oh, neat. So here we go. And the console is smart enough to recognize that it's JSON. So it even puts the data in a proper format we can play with, which is an object that has an entry called countries, which is a whole bunch of stuff, and date. Okay, so here's our countries, and they're all in here. Azerbaijan, Afghanistan. Looks like they got an extra space in front of Azerbaijan, so it's showing up a bit differently, but that's okay. And you can see them all in here. So Azerbaijan, looks like their data needs to be cleaned up slightly, but that is okay. There's two Azerbaijans, I'm not sure why. And that first one has nothing in it, so I suspect it's a mistake. But anyway, by the time you look at this, this might all be fixed. And so you can see here is all the data. And if we look at, for example, Barbados, they seem to be doing pretty good here. And you can see all the information in there, okay? So this is a way, this is information we just pulled off the internet, okay, from some other place, and it's now inside our code, which is pretty cool. Now, when we do the little preview, it's only showing us a few. We can show more and keep poking around and see what's going on, okay? So that is how you get information off the internet. And then you start being able to do stuff to it. Okay, so this is a somewhat weird concept to wrap your head around, but it sort of makes sense. So the page loads. When it's finished loading, it runs the $sign function up at the top, which calls fetch data. Fetch data, we don't need this comment anymore because we've got it in our code now. Fetch data then calls get, which goes out to the intranet again behind the scenes and loads this content. And when it's finished loading this content, it runs this other function, which is a completion function with the data passed to it. And then you can get your console log data and then write results, okay? Now the writing results doesn't have anything to write yet. We're going to get to that next. But the basic idea here is you go out, it comes back, etc. Now another cute thing you can do is if you want to see sources, for example, when we load our page, here's our stuff. Oh, so here's our fonts that we got from Google. Here's our scripts file. So sources is all the different files involved that are linked to from this page. And you'll see here we got our jQuery, we got our styles, we got our font CSS. We also have summary right here. So this is the extra little lookup it did separately. And you can see that inside the sources tab. And you can also go to the network tab and watch this when you reload. It shows you how everything is loading, and including our local stuff, which loads instantly, and then all these different elements from Google and things like that, like our fonts and our jQuery. And then you can see here the summary element that's coming down. You can see it's 32K. It took about eighth of a second or so. And then you can see all the different elements of how it loaded. And that's kind of handy. When you get more complex stuff, you can see all these different things loading asynchronously, and it's kind of cool. So there we go. So now we've got ourselves some data we've pulled in from the intranet. And then next time we're going to actually figure out what to do with that data, slice and dice it, and hopefully have it show up on screen. But before we go away, we have to remember to update our Git. So make a snapshot of this so we can go back to it, because we know this works and it works well. And the next step when we start doing all sorts of other things, we might make a mess. So we want to be able to go back if we need to. So I'm just going to go here and you can see the changes. It's kind of small, but that's okay. And we say add, and we're like, great. Added remote API fetch. Okay, and then there we go, and we are done, and we are ready for the next round. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.